Nagarjuna has been considering regarding the nature of the self, which purport to give its ultimate nature, must all be seen as incoherent on that ground alone, namely, that they propose an ultimate analysis. Nagarjuna now turns his attention to views not about the self, per se, but about the world as a whole. 21. If the world were limited, how could there be another world? If the world were unlimited, how could there be another world? Nagarjuna begins by questioning the sense of the question regarding the limits of the world. It seems to be like a question about the size of a table. But it is not. It is not, that is, a question about whether there is anything beyond the world. For suppose that the world is limited. That suggests that there is something beyond it. But that just means that we haven't come to the end of the world. The whole world includes that stuff that lies beyond. Or suppose that the world is unlimited. That suggests that there is nothing beyond the world. But that just means that everything that is in the world is, in fact, in the world, which is trivial. The question regarding the limits of the world, so Nagarjuna suggests, is nonsensical.
22. Since the continuum of the aggregates is like the flame of a butter lamp, it follows that neither its finitude nor its infinitude makes sense. In this discussion, Nagarjuna is focusing on the temporal limits of the world. Again, the question regarding whether the world has temporal limits presupposes that it is a single entity that either exists forever or that passes out of existence. But the world, Nagarjuna suggests, is more like a flame. It is a series of distinct flickering events. While each event is momentary, the sequence continues. But there is no entity that persists and can be said to be eternal or momentary. 23. If the previous were disintegrating and these aggregates, which depend upon those aggregates, did not arise, then the world would be finite. We could say that the world is finite if its current state simply ceased and nothing else arose. But absent that, there is no basis for positing an end, and dependent origination argues against positing an end to the world in time.
24. If the previous were not disintegrating and these aggregates, which depend upon those aggregates, did not arise, then the world would be infinite. On the other hand, the world would be infinite if it reached a stage where its current state became permanent. But again, given the nature of dependent arising, this is not a likely eventuality. 25. If one part were finite and one part were infinite, then the world would be finite and infinite. This would make no sense. Nagarjuna now makes use of the argument mobilized at XXV 17. The world cannot have these contradictory properties any more than an individual can. 26. How could one think that one part of the appropriator is destroyed and one part is not destroyed? This position makes no sense.
27. How could one think that one part of the appropriation is destroyed and one part is not destroyed? This position makes no sense. The appropriator here is the self, the appropriation, the existence of the world. Nagarjuna in these two verses is summing up and drawing together the conclusions of the two main arguments in the chapter. We want to say, on the one hand, that neither the world or the self is permanent. Both are thoroughly characterized by impermanence. On the other hand, we want to say of both that they endure in time and of each that there is no fixed boundary to its identity. But it can't be that either has both of these properties. 28. If it could be established that it is both finite and infinite, then it could be established that it is neither finite nor infinite. This verse echoes XXVI. If either the self or the world could be conceived as both finite and infinite, finitude and infinitude would make no sense at all. They are contradictory properties and cannot characterize the same thing at the same time. Moreover, they are exhaustive alternatives.
29. So, because all entities are empty, which views of permanence, etc., would occur, and to whom, when, why, and about what would they occur at all? But if we bear in mind the emptiness of all phenomena, on the subject and on the object side, these views do not even arise as possibilities. The self and all of the phenomena in the world itself, being empty, are dependently arisen, conventional phenomena. their emptiness itself is dependently arisen and empty. There is no candidate for permanence. There is no candidate for ultimate impermanence. And to the extent that we grasp and live this truth, there is no one to stand over and against the world as I against it. 30. I prostrate to Gautama, who through compassion taught the true doctrine, which leads to the relinquishing of all views. The most common interpretation of this final verse has the phrase, all views, tib, tabiye tamskad, skt, sarvadritphi, referring to all false views. That is, all views according to which things have inherent existence. These, after all, are the views under examination and refutation in this chapter. And it is the clear purport of this chapter that these views are the principal hindrances to enlightenment and the causes of attachment to cyclic existence. On this reading, Nagarjuna exempts his own view and therefore the Madhyamaka understanding of the Buddhist doctrine, which Nagarjuna here reminds us was taught compassionately explicitly to enable the rejection of these views. That doctrine, or standpoint, on this reading, is not to be relinquished. Indeed, one might say, it is not even a view in the relevant sense, since a view must be a view of something, and the analysis in terms of emptiness reveals a world with no entities to view. This interpretation is urged unanimously by all of the commentaries with which I am familiar and by many of the scholars with whom I have consulted.
But there is a second reading available, not instead of, but in addition to, the standard reading. There is a startling grammatical and poetic parallel between this closing verse and the dramatic dedicatory verses. Both have the form, if translated literally, almost preserving Tibetan word order, to him who. To that, great one / Gautam, I prostrate, gang gis, dam, palgodam de la Phayag Sha Lo. The echo at the end of the opening is apparent, and it draws attention to Nagarjuna's denial in the dedication of the possibility of any predication from the ultimate point of view of the inability to say anything positive that is literally true about the ultimate nature of things. When this is joined with our reading of such verses as 18, 7, 9, 12, 11, 12, 15, 24, and 25, all of which emphasize in different ways the impossibility of literal statements about the ultimate and the merely ostensive character of language about it, despite the need for such conventional assertion to enable one to approach ultimate truth, we can see a double entendre in this verse. For, if one reads it not from the conventional point of view as in the previous interpretation, but as an echo of the dedication, one can see Nagarjuna's own view and the Buddhist Dharma itself included under all views and, hence, necessarily to be relinquished once it is understood and used. And compare especially 13, 8. 8. The victorious ones have said that emptiness is the relinquishing of all views. For whomever emptiness is a view, that one has accomplished nothing. We can now return to this verse with more of Nagarjuna's analysis available. For the practitioner who directly realizes emptiness, nothing is present to consciousness but emptiness itself. For such a consciousness, there literally is no object, since there is in such a consciousness no reification of the kind that gives rise to subject-object duality. Moreover, since such a consciousness is directed only upon what can be found ultimately to exist, and since nothing can be so found, there is literally nothing toward which such a consciousness can be directed. But this